Hi everyone, this is a tutorial on the money market graph. So just to keep in mind, the money market graph is a graph that shows how nominal interest rates and the money supply and the public's demand for cash can impact the macroeconomy. One note that you should be very cognizant of as we approach this graph is that this is only for a limited reserves system. So in the United States right now, we no longer use this system as we have a system called the ample reserves. And we're going to learn about that later in the unit. So for most FRQs or multiple choice questions that you are going to see, the question is going to specify that the nation uses limited reserves. And most of the countries around the world in the present day still use this system. So the first thing I want you to do is to draw your graph, a set of axes like this, give it a title, and we're going to label the axes. So on the y-axis, we're going to label this nominal interest rates. And this is very important because we have another graph at the end of Unit 4 that uses real interest rates. So you want to be careful that you're using the correct interest rate. The x-axis is labeled the quantity of money. And when we're talking about the quantity of money, we are literally meaning the number or the quantity of currency and coins in the nation. We're going to draw a downward sloping curve that is a demand curve. And what is the demand curve? It's a demand for money. So this is typically sometimes referred to as transaction demand. And what that means is, where is the money I need for a medium of exchange situation? So at the beginning of the unit, we learned about the functions of money. So one of those functions is a medium of exchange. So the demand for money is directly related to how much cash do people in that country need to just pay for the cost of living, to go shopping for food, to pay for their homes, to pay for their utilities, so on and so forth. So this demand for money can actually shift to the right or shift to the left based on what's happening in an economy. So let's say, for example, aggregate demand is climbing. Businesses are doing well. They're hiring more workers. People are earning more money. Therefore, what's going to happen is all those groups are going to want money. So this demand for money can actually shift to the right. So just keep that in mind. Why is the demand for money a downward sloping curve? I'm going to draw something on the graph, and you do not have to draw this yet, but I just want to do it as a visual to show you why it's downward sloping. It's really about the opportunity cost of having money in your hands versus having money in a bank. So remember, the reason why we have banks is to keep our money safe. Another reason why we put money in the bank is because we want that money to have a better store of value. So if we have money in a shoebox under our bed, it's not going to earn any value because of inflation, and that's typically what we're dealing with. But if I put it in a bank, it can earn value because of interest rates. So I drew two interest rates on here to show you why this is a downward sloping curve. So if interest rates are 10%, it is more advantageous for me to put my money in a bank account, because that money is going to earn me 10% interest. Therefore, the quantity of money that I would have in my hands is much lower than if the interest rate was 3%. If the interest rate was 3%, I would have less of an incentive to put the money in the bank, because having it in a box in my bedroom is about the same as putting it in the bank, right? So if interest rates are low, the public doesn't feel like putting their money in a bank for the purpose of acquiring interest is worth not having it in their hands to spend. So we talk about the opportunity cost, and this you can write down, of holding money. And holding money means like literally in your hands, in your possession, in a wallet, in a box, like I said, but it's not in a bank, like you have access to it. Of holding cash versus putting it in a bank, right? So maybe when interest rates are high, you say to yourself, I'd rather take that $5,000 and put it in a savings account or a money market account and make some interest off of it rather than go spend it on new furniture. Or when interest rates are low, you say to yourself, well, what's the point of putting this money away? It's not really going to earn me anything. I might as well just spend it on something. So we often talk about the opportunity cost of holding cash. And I think sometimes students, the vocabulary, the word holding is something that they struggle remembering. So I'm putting it here, and hopefully you're writing it down too, so that way you remember what that is. So I'm actually going to erase these purple lines because we are now going to show the rest of the money market graph. So I really just wanted to go through why is the downward sloping curve a part of the demand for money. All right, so I'm just going to erase this stuff. It's going to take me a moment. All right, so now we're going to look at the rest of the money market graph, okay? So what we're going to do, let me zoom in on this so I can really erase just that tiny piece. Okay, so I'm going to switch back to my black pen, and I'm going to draw, and you can draw this too, a vertical line that represents the supply of money. Now, you might see some people online write MS for money supply. I learned this as supply of money, so that's how I always write my notation, but either is okay. I'm going to put a strong bullet point where these intersect. Then I'm going to draw a dotted line to the axis, and I'm going to call this the equilibrium nominal interest rate. And then down here, I'm going to call this QE for the equilibrium quantity. So something to note about this vertical supply of money. Why is it a vertical line? Well, the vertical line shows us that regardless of interest rate, the supply of money is always going to be this quantity. Because the supply of money, the number of actual currency and coins that is out in the economy, is set by a country's central bank. So in the United States, it's the Federal Reserve. So that supply of money is something that, regardless of the interest rate, the central bank has the power to either shift that line to the right to make the money supply bigger, or to shift that line to the left to make the money supply smaller. So it also shows that the change in the money supply will have a direct impact upon interest rates. And therefore, it's going to impact the macroeconomy, because if interest rates change, it's going to impact, remember this guy? It's going to impact some of these groups. In particular, households are going to be more or less apt to borrow money to spend on big purchases, cars, homes, additions to the house, a small business loan for a small business or even a big business. So interest sensitive consumption and investment are things that are impacted by the interest rates that are set by a central bank. And this is how they set them. So you learned about the tools of monetary policy already, and you learned about the buying and selling of bonds or open market operations. When the Federal Reserve, I shouldn't have said that because we don't use the limited reserves anymore. When the central bank of a country wants to make their money supply bigger, they would buy bonds. And why would they buy bonds? If they buy bonds from banks, the banks used to have a bond inside of them. Now they're going to buy them, and the banks have cash now. So graphically, what this looks like is shifting that supply of money to the right, and you'll notice, what does it do? It decreases the nominal interest rate. We went from here to here. So if you're a household, now the interest rates have fallen. Maybe now you feel more of an incentive, or you feel like it's more affordable to buy that new car. So there you go. Why would the Federal Reserve, I did it again. Why would the central bank lower interest rates? Well, they're going to lower them because they want households to spend more money. And why would you want households to spend more money? Because you're in a recession. So when we have recession, the central bank of a country can buy the bonds, shift the money supply to the right, and then interest rates will decline. This lower interest rate will cause an increase in interest-sensitive consumption from households and then investment from businesses. They're going to say, hey, interest rates are lower. Let's borrow that money. Let's build that new factory. Let's invest in that new technology. The opposite situation, and I'm going to use a different color because maybe that will help us visualize it, is if the central bank of a country wanted people to spend less money. Now, they're not going to change how much of their income they spend. It's about that interest-sensitive money. So this is only money that they'd be borrowing to spend on a big purchase, like a car, like a home, or using their credit card. So credit cards have an interest rate that is a direct impact of all the money that the credit companies have to borrow from big banks. So believe it or not, the change in interest rates can impact your credit card bill as well. So let's say we have a time of inflation and we want these households and businesses to just not borrow as much, don't use their credit card as much, temper down the spending. This is how we're trying to get demand to shift to the left, and that can help alleviate inflation. So then what they would do is they would want interest rates to be higher. Well, how do you make interest rates higher? You would want to make the money supply smaller. So I'm going to use a 1 again because I'm just starting from this original black line. And I'm going to do Q1 here, and I'm going to do a strong bullet point and a line to the y-axis. By selling the bonds, you're making the money supply smaller. When the money supply is smaller, money is more scarce. Therefore, just like anything, it's going to be more expensive to borrow. So by doing this, the central bank of a country makes it so some households and businesses look at that higher interest rate and they say, no, thank you, I am not going to borrow that money. And this will temper aggregate demand. And that's the whole goal of monetary policy, is to impact aggregate demand. So you either make borrowing money cheaper or more expensive. And again, the borrowing of money for big things, hundreds of thousands of dollars for businesses, or even millions, or hundreds of thousands or tens of thousands of dollars for households, or even just using a credit card. All of those things are impacted by interest rates. So if it's really expensive to borrow money right now, I'm probably not going to get a new car because I have a better deal with my older one. Now, having said that, if I was in an emergency, if my employer forced me to move to a new city, or if my car was, completely breaking down all the time and too expensive to fix, then yeah, maybe I'll still buy that car or buy that new home because I have to. But that higher interest rate over here is to discourage people and businesses from borrowing the money. The lower interest rate is to encourage people. So therefore they say things like, ooh, interest rates are low right now. I got to get in on this. It's a great time to buy a new car. So again, there's a few little tricks to help you with this. To make the money supply bigger, we buy bonds, okay? To make the money supply smaller, we sell bonds. And did you hear the word? Buy starts with a B, and so is bigger. So the money supply gets bigger when we buy bonds. When we sell bonds, this starts with an S. It makes the money supply smaller. So that can help you remember which way to move the supply of money. Now, remember what I said at the beginning of this, that the demand of money can also shift as well. So let me use a different color to show you that. If aggregate demand was increasing because let's say there was a massive amount of tax cuts in the country, you could very well, in fact, see the demand for money shift to the right. And therefore, just like anything, like I said before, when there's greater demand for something, it's going to be more scarce and your interest rates are going to be higher. If you're in a severe recession and people feel like they can't borrow money, why would I make a big move for my business right now? People aren't spending money. Or maybe credit cards have become less expensive, so people are using those more and the demand for cash falls. You could see this demand for money shift all the way to the left. And I just drew it there so I could use that same interest rate. So you could see that demand for the money shift to the left too. So the supply of money is not always the thing that moves. It could be the demand. So this is the money market graph. Mr. Clifford also has a really cool video. So if you want to check that out, please feel free. But this is exactly what I'm going to go over in class with students. And this video is available for you if you need to hear this again, you need to review for the end of the year for the exam, or if you were just absent from class. So hope you got something out of that, but feel free to consult a few more resources if you need a little bit more.